Mieszko, the first prince of Poland. Long before the stone castles and great cathedrals of Poland were built, the land around the wide rivers and deep forests was a place of tribes, warriors, and ancient traditions. Dense woods stretched farther than the eye could see, broken only by rivers that carved silver paths through the earth. Wolves howled at night, and smoke from wooden huts rose into the cold morning sky. This was the land of the Polani tribe, whose name meant people of the fields. They lived near the fertile banks of the Wata River, where the soil was rich and the land open enough for farming and grazing animals. Their homes were simple wooden structures surrounded by earthen walls. Life was hard, but the people were strong. Among them was a boy who would one day become the ruler of these lands. His name was Mieszko. In the early mornings of his childhood, Mieszko would often climb the small hill near his father's stronghold and look across the river valley. From there, he could see forests stretching like a dark sea and small villages scattered across the plains. He wondered what lay beyond those distant trees. His father, Mieszko, was a respected leader of the Polani tribe. Warriors followed him into battle, and neighboring tribes feared his strength. Yet Mieszko knew that the land was divided. Many tribes lived in the region, some friendly, some hostile. Someday, his father told him, these lands must be united. Otherwise, stronger kingdoms will swallow us. Mieszko listened carefully. Even as a boy, he understood that the future of his people depended on strength and wisdom. The Polani tribe lived according to old beliefs. They honored the spirits of nature and worshipped many gods. Sacred groves deep in the forest were places where priests offered sacrifices and prayers. Fires burned there during festivals, and people believed the gods of thunder, forest, and river watched over them. But young Mieszko often wondered if there was something greater beyond these spirits. One evening, when the sky glowed red with sunset, he asked an old traveler who had arrived from the south. "Is our world the only one?" Mieszko asked. The traveler smiled beneath his gray beard. "No," he said quietly. "Beyond these lands are kingdoms where people worship one God, the creator of all things." Mieszko listened carefully. The idea stayed with him long after the traveler had gone. Years passed, and the boy grew into a strong young man. His shoulders broadened, and his skill with sword and spear became known among the warriors of the tribe. He trained every day with the soldiers of his father's court, learning how to fight, lead, and defend his people. But he also learned something else. Leadership meant more than strength. Tribes fought constantly over land and power. Sometimes villages burned and families fled into the forests. Mieszko hated seeing his people suffer. One cold winter night, his father called him into the wooden hall of the stronghold. A fire burned in the center, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "My son," Mieszko said, "the time is coming when you must lead." Mieszko nodded silently. "You will inherit not only our warriors," his father continued, "but also our enemies. Remember this, a ruler must unite his people, not divide them." Mieszko understood. Soon after, Mieszko died, and the young warrior became the leader of the Polani. Many wondered if he was ready. Mieszko proved them wrong quickly. The first years of his rule were filled with struggle. Neighboring tribes tested his strength. attacking borders and raiding villages. But Mieszko responded with determination. He gathered warriors from surrounding settlements and organized them into disciplined groups. Under his leadership, the Polani tribe grew stronger. He built wooden fortresses along important routes and strengthened the main stronghold near the Warta River. That place would later become known as Poznan. At the time, however, it was only a fortified village surrounded by earth walls and wooden towers. Mieszko saw its potential. "This place will grow," he told his advisors. "People will come here to trade, build homes, and live safely." They looked around at the muddy paths and wooden houses and wondered how such a dream could come true. But Mieszko had vision. He invited craftsmen, farmers, and traders to settle near the stronghold. Slowly, the settlement grew larger. Markets began to appear near the gates, where merchants exchanged furs, grain, tools, and salt. More homes were built. Children played near the river banks. The small village was becoming something greater. At the same time, Mieszko continued to expand his power. He formed alliances with some tribes and defeated others in battle. His warriors respected him because he fought beside them, never hiding behind walls while others risked their lives. Stories spread through the region about the fearless leader of the Polani. Yet, even as his power grew, Mieszko felt something missing. Late at night, he sometimes walked alone along the wooden walls of the stronghold, looking at the stars above the dark forest. He remembered the traveler who had spoken about one creator. Is there truly one God? Mieszko wondered quietly. The priests of the old gods would not have liked such thoughts, but the young ruler's mind was open to new ideas. Far to the south and west, Christian kingdoms were growing stronger. Their rulers believed in one God and followed the teachings of Jesus the Messiah. Mieszko had heard of these lands, and though he did not yet know it, the future of his people would soon lead him toward that faith. But first, he had to secure his lands. The village near the Water River continued to grow. Traders arrived from distant regions, bringing news of powerful rulers and new religions spreading across Europe. One day an advisor approached Mieszko with important information. "Prince," he said, "our neighbors are forming alliances. If we remain divided from them, we may face great danger." Mieszko listened carefully. The young ruler knew that strength alone would not be enough to protect his people. He would need allies and wisdom. And soon fate would lead him to a woman whose influence would change the destiny of his land forever. Her name was Dobrawa. But that part of the story had not yet begun. For now, the fires of the growing settlement burned brightly beside the Warta River. The small village that Mieszko had strengthened and protected was beginning its long journey toward becoming one of the most important places in the land. One day, people would call it the first great city of Poland, and the young prince who built it would be remembered as the founder of a nation. The settlement near the Warta River continued to grow stronger with each passing season. Wooden houses multiplied around the fortified stronghold, and smoke from hearth fires rose into the morning sky like thin gray ribbons. Farmers worked the nearby fields, fishermen cast their nets into the river, and traders arrived with carts filled with salt, furs, iron tools, and cloth. The place that would one day be called Poznan was becoming the heart of the Polani lands. At the center of it all stood Prince Mieszko I. He was no longer the curious boy who had once watched the horizon from a hill. Now, he was a powerful leader, whose name was spoken with respect, and sometimes fear, across many lands. Mieszko was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. His armor was simple but strong, made of leather reinforced with iron rings. A long sword hung at his side, and he carried it not as decoration, but as a weapon he used often. For the lands around the water were far from peaceful. Many tribes lived across the forests and plains, some friendly, others hostile. Raids were common, and borders shifted with every season. To protect his people, Mieszko had to become more than a ruler. He had to become a warrior. One cold morning, a messenger arrived at the stronghold gates, his horse covered in foam and mud. "Prince!" he shouted as he was brought before Mieszko. "Warriors from the north have crossed the river. They are burning farms and stealing cattle." Mieszko stood immediately. "How many?" "More than 200. The prince turned to his commanders. "Gather the warriors. We ride before sunset." Within hours, the stronghold was alive with preparation. Blacksmiths hammered iron spearheads, warriors sharpened blades, and horses were saddled. Mieszko did not command his men from safety. When they rode into battle, he rode at the front. The army moved quickly through the forest, following narrow paths known only to hunters and scouts. Snow crunched under their boots, and the cold wind carried the smell of smoke from distant burning farms. Soon, they reached the raiders. The enemy warriors were scattered across a small village, taking what they could. They did not expect resistance to come so quickly. Mieszko raised his sword. "Polani!" he shouted. His warriors charged with a thunder of hooves and iron. The battle was fierce, but short. Surprised by the sudden attack, the raiders fled back toward the forest. Some were captured, others escaped into the trees. When the fighting ended, the villagers gathered around Mieszko with gratitude. "You saved us, Prince," an old farmer said. Mieszko looked at the burned huts and frightened families. "This land must become strong," he said quietly. "Only then will our people live in peace." Victories like this spread his reputation far beyond the Warta Valley. More tribes began to recognize his authority. Some joined willingly, seeing that unity brought protection. Others resisted and were defeated in battle. Slowly, the scattered tribes of the region began to form something new, a larger and stronger realm under one leader. But power also brought danger. Far to the west lay the mighty Holy Roman Empire, ruled by powerful Christian kings and emperors. Their armies were well organized, and their lands were rich. To the south lived the people of Bohemia, whose rulers also followed the Christian faith. Mieszko knew that his growing realm could not remain isolated forever. One evening, he gathered his advisors in the great wooden hall of the stronghold. Torches flickered along the walls as the men sat around a heavy oak table. "We are growing stronger," one commander said proudly. "Soon no tribe will challenge us." Another advisor shook his head. "The danger is not only from tribes," he warned. "Great kingdoms surround us. If they see us as enemies, they may try to conquer our lands." Mieszko listened silently. "What do you suggest?" he finally asked. "We must build alliances," the advisor replied. "And we must learn from the kingdoms beyond our forests." That night, Mieszko again walked along the wooden walls of the stronghold, thinking about the future. Below him, the village was quiet. Only a few lanterns glowed in the darkness. He remembered again the traveler from his youth, the one who had spoken of a single creator. In recent years, Mieszko had heard more about the faith of the Christians. Merchants passing through the settlement spoke about churches, priests, and the teachings of a man called Jesus Christ. They said he was the Son of God, the Messiah, who had come to save people. Some said his followers baptized believers in water in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Others called him by the ancient name Yeshua. Mieszko did not yet fully understand these teachings, but something about them stirred his heart. He began speaking with travelers and missionaries who passed through the region. From them, he learned about faith, forgiveness, and the idea that there was one true God who created the world. It was very different from the many gods worshipped by the tribes. Meanwhile, the settlement near the water river kept growing. New wooden walls were built to protect it. Workshops appeared where craftsmen forged weapons, carved tools, and built carts. A market square formed where merchants from distant lands gathered to trade goods. People from small villages began moving there because they felt safer under Mieszko's protection. Slowly, the once small settlement became the most important place in the region. One afternoon, Mieszko stood on a wooden tower overlooking the growing town. Beside him stood one of his closest advisors. "It is hard to believe this was once only a small village," the advisor said. Mieszko nodded. "This is only the beginning. What do you see for its future, Prince?" Mieszko looked across the rooftops toward the river, shining in the sunlight. "I see a great city, a place where people from many lands come to trade, build, and live together." He paused. "And from here, we will build a strong nation. But the path toward that future would not be simple. Beyond the forests and mountains, powerful rulers were watching the rise of the warrior prince of the Polani. Some saw him as a potential ally. Others saw him as a threat. And soon, Mieszko would make a decision that would change not only his own life, but the destiny of his people forever. For in the south, in the land of Bohemia, lived a wise and noble princess named Dobrawa of Bohemia. Their meeting would open the door to faith, alliance, and the birth of a Christian kingdom. But before that could happen, Mieszko would have to face new battles, both on the battlefield and within his own heart. The warrior prince was growing into something more. He was becoming the founder of a nation. The power of Mieszko I continued to grow across the lands of the Polani. Tribes that had once fought each other now gathered under one banner. Warriors guarded the roads, farmers worked the fertile soil, and traders traveled more safely through the forests. At the center of this growing realm stood the fortified settlement that would become Poznan. Wooden towers overlooked the river, and new houses appeared each season. The marketplace was full of voices from many lands. Yet with growth came new dangers. One autumn evening, Mieszko sat in the great hall of his stronghold with his advisors. Outside, the wind blew across the water river, carrying the cold promise of winter. A messenger had arrived with troubling news. "Prince," the messenger said, bowing low, "powerful rulers from the west are watching our lands. They fear your growing strength." The hall grew quiet. One of Mieszko's commanders leaned forward. "We are ready to fight them if they come." But an older advisor shook his head. War with great kingdoms would bring destruction, he said. We must find allies instead. Mieszko listened carefully. What alliances are possible? He asked. The advisor replied. To the south lies Bohemia. Its ruler is strong and his people follow the Christian faith. If we become friends with them, it will protect us from enemies. Mieszko thought about this for a long moment. And how do we form such an alliance? He asked. The advisor smiled slightly. Through marriage. The idea was not unusual in those times. Rulers often married into powerful families to secure peace and cooperation between lands. The ruler of Bohemia has a daughter, the advisor continued, a wise and faithful princess named Dobrawa of Bohemia. The name was unfamiliar to Mieszko, but the idea stayed in his mind. Later that night, he walked along the wooden walls of the stronghold. The torches burned quietly, and the moon reflected on the river below. Marriage was more than a personal decision. It would shape the future of his people. But the advisors were right. The lands around them were changing. Powerful Christian kingdoms were growing stronger, and alliances would be necessary. After several days of thought, Mieszko made his decision. Messengers were sent south to Bohemia with gifts, fine furs, weapons, and amber from the Baltic coast. Weeks later, the reply came. The ruler of Bohemia welcomed the idea of alliance. Princess Dobrawa would travel north to meet the Prince of the Polani. The journey took many days. When the princess finally arrived near the stronghold, people gathered along the road to see her. Dobrawa rode in a decorated carriage, surrounded by guards and attendants. Her clothing was elegant but modest, reflecting both her royal status and her Christian faith. When Mieszko first saw her, he noticed something unusual about her presence. She carried herself with calm confidence and kindness. They greeted each other in the courtyard of the stronghold. "Welcome to my lands," Mieszko said respectfully. Dobrawa smiled. "Thank you, Prince. I have heard much about your courage and leadership." During the days that followed, they spoke often. Dobrawa was intelligent and thoughtful. She asked questions about the tribes, the villages, and the future of the land. But she also spoke about something very important to her: her faith. She believed deeply in the teachings of Jesus Christ. One afternoon, they walked together near the river. "The lands here are beautiful," Dobrawa said. "They are strong lands," Mieszko replied. "But they are still divided in many ways." Dobrawa looked at him thoughtfully. "In my homeland, we believe there is one God who created all people," she said. "Through faith in Christ, people can find unity and peace." Mieszko listened carefully. "I have heard about this faith," he said, "but many of my people still follow the old gods." Dobrawa nodded gently. "Faith cannot be forced," she said. "It must be accepted by the heart." Over time, Dobrawa shared more about the Christian teachings, about forgiveness, hope, and salvation. She spoke about baptism, the act through which believers publicly committed their lives to God. For Mieszko, these ideas were both new and powerful. He had long wondered whether there was one creator beyond the many tribal gods. Now he was hearing about a faith that answered those questions. The union between Mieszko and Dobrawa would not only bring peace between their lands, but also open the door to cultural and spiritual change. The wedding ceremony took place in a grand celebration. Warriors, nobles, and travelers gathered to witness the union of the Polani prince and the Bohemian princess. Music filled the air, fires burned brightly, and the feast lasted long into the night. But the most important changes were yet to come. Dobrawa brought Christian priests with her to the Polani lands. They built small wooden churches and began teaching the people about God. At first, many villagers were curious but cautious. The old beliefs had been part of their lives for generations. Yet Mieszko himself continued to listen and learn. One evening, he spoke privately with one of the priests. "If your God is truly the creator of all things," Mieszko asked, "why did he send his son into the world?" The priest answered gently, "To bring salvation to humanity. Through Jesus the Messiah, people can receive forgiveness and eternal life." These words stayed in Mieszko's heart. The influence of Dobrawa was strong, but she never forced him to change his beliefs. Instead, she encouraged him to seek the truth for himself. Months passed. The alliance between the Polani and Bohemia strengthened the region. Trade increased, and enemies became more cautious. But even more importantly, Mieszko began to feel that a great decision was approaching. One that would shape the future of his people. Soon, the prince who had united tribes through strength would unite them in faith. A choice that historians would later remember as the turning point in the birth of Poland. But before that moment arrived, Mieszko would face one more battle within his own heart, and the path ahead would lead him toward baptism, transformation, and the beginning of a Christian nation. The marriage of Mieszko I and Dobrawa of Bohemia brought new life to the growing lands of the Polani. Trade increased, alliances became stronger, and travelers from distant regions arrived with stories, skills, and ideas. The settlement that had grown beside the Warta River, later known as Poznan, continued to expand. Its wooden walls were reinforced, new houses were built, and the marketplace became louder with voices from many lands. But the greatest change was happening inside the heart of the prince. Since Dobrawa's arrival, Christian priests had begun teaching the people about the faith of Jesus Christ. Small wooden chapels were built where believers gathered to pray and sing. At first, many people watched with curiosity. The old traditions were deeply rooted in the lives of the tribes. Sacred groves, ancient rituals, and many gods had guided their culture for generations. Yet the message of one Creator, one God who loved humanity and sent his Son to bring salvation, was powerful. Mieszko listened carefully to these teachings. One evening, he sat with Dobrawa in the quiet courtyard of the stronghold. The sky was filled with stars, and the torches along the walls flickered gently in the wind. "You have brought many changes to my land," Mieszko said. Dobrawa looked at him kindly. "I only brought faith and hope," she replied. "The rest comes from the people who accept it." Mieszko looked toward the dark river beyond the walls. "Your priests speak of one God who created everything," he said slowly. "A God greater than all the spirits our people worship." Dobrawa nodded. "Yes, the one true God. And they say that his Son, the Messiah, came to save the world." "That is the heart of our faith," she answered. Mieszko remained silent for a long time. Finally he spoke again. "If I choose this path, it will change everything." Dobrawa understood what he meant. If the ruler accepted Christianity, many of his people would follow. The entire direction of the land could change. But such a decision had to come from conviction, not pressure. You must choose freely, Dobrawa said gently. In the weeks that followed, Mieszko continued speaking with priests and scholars who had come from Christian lands. They told him stories from the sacred scriptures about creation, about the prophets, and about the life and sacrifice of Jesus the Messiah. One priest explained baptism. Through baptism, he said, a person declares faith in God and begins a new life. The idea of spiritual rebirth deeply moved the prince. For years he had fought battles to unite tribes and protect his people. But now he saw that unity could also come through faith. Soon, the moment of decision arrived. In the year 966, Mieszko announced that he would accept baptism and follow the teachings of Christ. The news spread quickly across the land. Some people were surprised. Others were curious. A few feared that the old tradition would disappear. But many trusted their prince. The baptism ceremony was prepared with great care. Priests traveled from Christian lands to witness the event, and nobles from surrounding regions were invited. The ceremony would not only mark a spiritual transformation, but also signal to other kingdoms that the Polani lands were joining the Christian world. On the day of the ceremony, people gathered near a wooden chapel. Torches burned brightly, and the air was filled with quiet anticipation. Mieszko stood beside Dobrawa, wearing a simple white garment that symbolized purification and new life. The priest began to speak about the meaning of faith. He spoke about the love of God, the sacrifice of Christ, and the promise of salvation. Then he asked the prince a question. Do you believe in God, the creator of heaven and earth, and in his Son, the Messiah? Mieszko answered with firm conviction. Yes, I believe. The priest then poured water over his head, baptizing him in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In that moment, the warrior prince who had once worshipped many gods became a follower of the one true God. For many believers, the Messiah was also known by the ancient name Jeshua. Mieszko accepted the calling to lead his people toward this new faith. After the ceremony, Dobrawa smiled with quiet joy. You have taken a great step, she said. Mieszko looked at the gathered people. This step is not only for me, he said. It is for the future of our land. Soon after his baptism, many nobles and warriors chose to follow his example. They too were baptized and began learning the teachings of Christianity. Churches were built in important settlements, and priests traveled through villages teaching the people about faith. Mieszko encouraged peaceful conversion rather than force. He believed that true faith must grow in the hearts of the people. At the same time, the political effects were powerful. Neighboring Christian kingdoms now saw Mieszko not as a pagan tribal leader, but as a fellow Christian ruler. This strengthened alliances and helped protect the young realm from foreign domination. The decision of one man had changed the destiny of a nation. The growing land under Mieszko's leadership was becoming something new. It was becoming the foundation of Poland. Yet the prince's life was far from peaceful. Even with faith and alliances, enemies still threatened the borders. Wars would still need to be fought, and new lands would still need to be defended. But now, Mieszko carried more than a sword. He carried a mission to build a strong and united Christian kingdom for his people. And one day, the legacy he was creating would pass to his son, a boy who would grow into one of the greatest rulers in Polish history. His name was Bolesław I, the Brave. But that chapter of the story was still in the future. For now, the newly baptized prince looked toward the horizon and continued building the land that would one day be known as Poland. After the baptism of Mieszko I in the year 966, the lands under his rule began to change in ways that people had never seen before. The stronghold beside the Water River, growing into the settlement later called Poznan, became not only the center of political power, but also the center of a new spiritual life. Wooden churches began to appear beside the markets and homes. Bells rang across the fields to call people to prayer. Priests and missionaries traveled from village to village, teaching about the faith of Jesus Christ. At first, some villagers watched these changes with uncertainty. For generations, their ancestors had honored the old gods of forest, sky, and river. Sacred groves stood deep within the woods, where priests once performed ancient rituals. But the message of Christianity slowly spread. The priests spoke about a creator who loved all people, and about the Messiah who brought hope and salvation to the world. Many were moved by the teachings. Prince Mieszko understood that change must happen wisely. He did not force everyone to abandon their old traditions immediately. Instead, he encouraged learning and allowed the new faith to grow gradually. One morning, he met with his advisors inside the great hall of the stronghold. "We must build churches and invite teachers from Christian lands," Mieszko said. "Our people must understand this faith." One advisor nodded. "If our land becomes known as Christian, other kingdoms will respect us more." This was very important. In those times, many powerful rulers believed it was their duty to bring Christianity to pagan lands, even by force. By accepting baptism, Mieszko had protected his realm from such threats. But his vision went far beyond political safety. He wanted his people to grow stronger not only in battle, but also in wisdom and faith. Soon, Christian missionaries began arriving from many regions of Europe. Some came from the lands of Bohemia, the homeland of his wife, Dobrawa of Bohemia. Dobrawa herself played a very important role in spreading Christianity. She supported the building of churches and helped organize communities of believers. She often spoke with villagers and noble families, explaining the teachings of the faith with patience and kindness. Many people trusted her because they saw that her faith was sincere. Meanwhile, the prince continued strengthening his realm. New fortresses were built along important rivers and trade routes. Warriors protected the borders from raids, and new settlements were established in fertile areas. Merchants from distant lands began visiting the growing towns. They brought iron tools, silver coins, and fine cloth. The land that had once been a collection of tribes was slowly becoming a united state. One afternoon, Mieszko stood on a wooden tower overlooking the busy settlement near the Water River. Beside him stood one of his commanders. "It grows larger every year," the commander said, pointing toward the marketplace where traders and villagers gathered. "Yes," Mieszko replied. "This place will one day be one of the greatest cities in our land." The commander smiled. "You had this vision when it was only a small village." Mieszko looked across the rooftops and fields. "Strong nations begin with small beginnings," he said. While the land grew stronger, the prince also faced challenges. Some tribal leaders resisted the new changes, They feared losing their traditions and power. A few even rebelled against Mieszko's rule. But the prince dealt with these situations firmly, yet wisely. Instead of destroying villages, he often offered peace if the leaders accepted unity and cooperation. His goal was not endless war. His goal was unity. During these years, another joyful event took place. A son was born to Mieszko. The boy was named Bolesław I, the Brave. The birth of the prince was celebrated throughout the land. For Mieszko, it meant more than the joy of fatherhood. It meant that the future of the realm had an heir who would one day continue the work he had begun. Dobrawa often held the child near the windows of the stronghold, looking out across the land. "This boy will grow up in a different world than the one we knew," she said one evening. Mieszko nodded. He will inherit a united land. As Bolesław grew older, he watched his father train with warriors, lead councils, and speak with priests. Even as a child, he showed great energy and courage. The people began to say that the boy carried the spirit of a future leader. Meanwhile, Christianity continued spreading. Large baptism ceremonies were held in rivers and lakes, where many villagers publicly declared their faith. Priests taught prayers and scriptures, and communities began celebrating Christian festivals together. These events brought new unity among the people. Instead of separate tribes with different beliefs, they were becoming one people, sharing the same faith and ruler. The transformation was slow but powerful. Years passed, and the land under Mieszko's leadership grew stronger with every season. Enemies who once threatened the region now thought twice before attacking. The alliances with Christian kingdoms brought new respect and stability. But the prince knew his work was not finished. Beyond the forests and rivers, many lands were still divided. Some were ruled by hostile leaders who might challenge the young state. Mieszko prepared for whatever the future might bring. He continued strengthening his army, building fortresses, and encouraging faith among his people. At night, when the fires burned quietly inside the stronghold, he sometimes looked at his young son, sleeping peacefully. "This land will one day belong to you," Mieszko whispered. "You must protect it and make it even stronger." The boy did not yet understand the weight of those words, but history would remember him. For the child growing up in the stronghold of the Polani would one day become the first crowned king of the land his father was building. And the kingdom that began with the vision of one prince would continue to grow long after his lifetime. As the years passed, the realm ruled by Mieszko, the first, grew stronger and more organized. What had once been scattered tribes across forests and rivers was slowly becoming a united land. But unity brought attention. Powerful neighbors watched carefully as Mieszko strengthened his rule, built fortresses, and expanded his influence. Some respected him. Others feared that his growing power might threaten their own lands. The fortified settlement beside the Water River, later known as Poznan, remained the heart of his realm. From there, Mieszko directed armies, welcomed envoys from foreign rulers, and continued building the foundations of a future nation. Yet peace never lasted long in those days. One spring morning, a scout arrived at the stronghold, breathless from riding many miles. "Prince," the scout said urgently, "warriors from the western lands are gathering near our borders." Mieszko immediately called his commanders. The threat came from territories influenced by the powerful Holy Roman Empire. Local rulers and warlords sometimes tried to expand their power by attacking weaker neighbors. But Mieszko's lands were no longer weak. Inside the Great Hall, the prince spread a rough map across the table. "If they cross the river here," he said, pointing to a narrow valley, "they will try to reach our settlements." His commanders studied the map. "We can stop them in the forests," one suggested. Another shook his head. "If we wait, they may reach the villages." Mieszko made his decision. "We meet them before they reach our people." Within hours, messengers rode across the countryside, calling warriors to gather. Farmers left their fields, blacksmiths worked through the night preparing weapons, and soldiers assembled near the stronghold gates. Mieszko stood before them, wearing armor of iron rings and leather. "We fight not for conquest today," he told them, "but to protect our homes." The army marched west through dense forests, where tall pine trees blocked much of the sunlight. Scouts moved ahead quietly, watching for enemy movement. Soon they found the invading force. The enemy army was large, made up of warriors from several different tribes and territories. They expected an easy victory against what they believed was still a loose tribal land. They were wrong. Mieszko had trained his warriors well. They fought in organized groups, using shields and spears in coordinated formations. The battle began at dawn. War horns echoed through the valley as the Polani warriors charged. Mieszko fought at the front, his sword flashing in the morning light. His presence gave courage to his soldiers, who pushed forward with determination. The fighting was fierce and lasted many hours. But by midday, the enemy began to retreat. The disciplined warriors of Mieszko had broken their lines. When the battle finally ended, the invading forces withdrew beyond the border. The victory strengthened Mieszko's reputation even further. News of the battle spread quickly through neighboring lands. Many rulers began to realize that the Prince of the Polani was not merely a tribal leader. He was the founder of a rising power. Yet war always carried a heavy cost. After the battle, Mieszko walked through the camp where wounded warriors rested. He spoke with them, thanking them for their bravery. "You defended our people," he told them. Some of the priests who had come with the army prayed with the injured and reminded them of the teachings of Jesus Christ, that courage and sacrifice for others were noble acts. Mieszko himself often reflected on the balance between faith and war. His belief in God had changed his heart, but he still had a responsibility to defend his people. One evening he spoke with Dobrawa of Bohemia about these struggles. "I wish there were no wars," he admitted. Dobrawa placed a hand on his arm. "A ruler must protect those who depend on him," she said gently. "But you also bring peace when you unite people." Mieszko knew she was right. Through strength, alliances, and faith, he was creating stability in lands that had long been divided. Meanwhile, the young Prince Bolesław I the Brave was growing quickly. The boy watched everything his father did. He watched the warriors train, listened to the council meetings, and learned from the priests who taught him about faith. Even as a child, Bolesław showed courage and strong will. One afternoon, he followed the soldiers to a training field outside the stronghold. He tried lifting a wooden practice sword, though it was heavy for his small arms. The soldiers laughed kindly. Mieszko approached and knelt beside his son. "You wish to be a warrior?" he asked. Bolesław nodded eagerly. "Then you must first learn patience and wisdom," Mieszko said. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "One day you may rule this land. Strength alone is not enough. A ruler must understand his people." These lessons would shape the young prince in the years ahead. For now, however, the realm still depended on Mieszko's leadership. More fortresses were built across the growing territory. Roads between settlements were improved, and trade continued expanding. Travelers from distant regions brought stories about the rising power in the lands of the Polani. Many began calling it something new. They called it Poland. What had started as scattered tribes was slowly becoming a nation. Yet time moves forward for every ruler. Mieszko continued building and defending his land, knowing that one day the responsibility would pass to his son. And when that day came, the boy who had watched his father fight and lead would carry the story of Poland into a new chapter. A chapter that would eventually lead to the crown of a king. With the borders of his realm secured through both diplomacy and force, Mieszko I turned his attention to the wider world. He understood that strength alone could not ensure the survival and prosperity of his lands. Alliances with neighboring kingdoms were now more important than ever. The marriage to Dobrawa of Bohemia had already opened the door to peace with the south. But Mieszko knew that other regions, far to the west and north, watched the growing power of the Polani with cautious eyes. One morning, an envoy arrived from the court of a Christian ruler to the west, bringing gifts of silver, fine cloth, and horses. They spoke of the emperor's interest in establishing friendly relations with the lands of the Polani. Mieszko received the envoys in the great hall of the stronghold in Poznan. Torches lit the wooden walls, and the river outside reflected the early morning sun. "We are honored to meet Prince Mieszko," the envoy said. "Your fame has reached even our distant lands. We wish to form trade and friendship." Mieszko nodded thoughtfully. "Friendship brings strength," he said. "I will welcome cooperation, but my people must be protected first." Over the following months, trade agreements were made. Silver coins from the west flowed into the settlements of the Polani, and artisans arrived with new skills. Iron tools, fine fabrics, and knowledge of architecture began to spread, helping the villages grow into towns. Meanwhile, Mieszko's influence continued to expand eastward and northward. Tribes that had once resisted him now sought alliances. Some pledged loyalty voluntarily, impressed by his leadership and the growing Christian faith that united his people. Others were persuaded through careful negotiation and, when necessary, the threat of force. The prince's marriage to Dobrawa proved to be a diplomatic masterpiece. Through her connections in Bohemia, Mieszko was able to communicate with rulers across Central Europe. Letters exchanged promises of trade, military support, and mutual respect. These alliances reduced the number of enemies at his borders and gave him the freedom to strengthen the internal administration of his lands. But diplomacy was not without challenges. Some neighboring rulers feared the rise of a Christian state in the region and sent envoys with subtle threats. Others sought to test Mieszko's resolve with small raids or provocations along the borders. Each time, the prince handled the situations with a mixture of strategy patience, and when necessary, decisive military action. Through these years, Dobrawa continued to support the spiritual growth of the land. Churches were established in major settlements, priests were sent to villages, and Christian festivals began to replace pagan ceremonies. The people slowly embraced the teachings of Jesus Christ. Even those who had initially resisted now saw the benefits of unity under one faith and one ruler. Mieszko understood that faith could be as powerful as swords and walls. It brought cohesion to his people and legitimacy in the eyes of foreign Christian rulers. One evening, Mieszko and Dobrawa walked along the ramparts of the stronghold. The river below gleamed in the moonlight, and the settlement stretched into the distance, alive with lights from homes and workshops. "Our land is changing," Dobrawa said softly. "Yes," Mieszko replied. "It is becoming strong, organized and respected, but there is still work to be done. We must protect what we have built and continue to unite more lands under one rule and one faith." Dobrawa took his hand. "You have done much already. Your son will inherit a strong and faithful realm. Teach him well." Mieszko looked toward the young boy, who was already showing signs of courage and wisdom beyond his years. Bolesław watched his father train warriors, negotiate with envoys, and make decisions that shaped the future of the land. "Yes," Mieszko said, "he must learn to lead both with strength and with wisdom." Trade, alliances, and diplomacy were essential. But Mieszko knew that future generations would judge him by more than treaties. His legacy would be measured by the unity, faith, and prosperity of his people. Soon, he began to plan campaigns to strengthen the northern and eastern borders. These were lands inhabited by tribes that still resisted centralized authority. Some were wary of the growing Christian influence, while others simply prized their independence. Mieszko approached these campaigns carefully. He preferred to form alliances and negotiate before resorting to war. But if conflict was necessary, he led his armies personally, as he had in the early days of his rule. His experience, courage, and tactical skill made him a formidable opponent. During these years, Mieszko also began establishing a system of local governance in his settlements. He appointed trusted nobles and advisors to oversee villages and towns, ensuring that laws were enforced and trade was protected. Christian priests helped in moral and educational guidance, and communities began to flourish under this dual leadership of faith and governance. By the end of the decade, Mieszko's realm stretched across vast territories, united under his leadership and Christian faith. His alliances with neighboring kingdoms had created a network of support and protection. His son, Bolesław, was growing into a young man prepared to inherit the responsibilities of rulership. The prince knew that the future of his land depended not only on strength in battle, but also on wisdom, faith, and diplomacy. And through it all, the river that ran past Poznan, silent witness to the growth of a nation, reminded him that time moved steadily forward, carrying the promise of a new era for the people of Poland. The lands of the Polani were no longer small, scattered villages by the Water River. Under the leadership of Mieszko I, the realm had become a growing state, united by strength, wisdom, and faith. Yet Mieszko knew that true security and lasting unity required more than strong walls and peaceful villages. It required expansion. Beyond the forests to the north and east, lay tribes that remained independent, often hostile, and sometimes raiding settlements along the borders. Mieszko's vision was clear. He would bring these lands under one rule, not merely as a conqueror, but as a unifier. One crisp morning, Mieszko called his commanders to the Great Hall in Poznan. Maps were spread across the table, showing rivers, forests, and villages that had yet to recognize his authority. "We cannot leave our neighbors divided," he said. "We must bring these lands into unity for the protection of our people and for the future of our realm." The commanders nodded. Each understood the challenges ahead: harsh winters, dense forests, and warriors who would not surrender easily. Mieszko led the first campaign personally. Riding at the front of his army, he inspired courage among his warriors. His sword flashed in the sunlight, and his shield bore the symbol of his house. The first challenge came from a northern tribe, known for their skill with the bow and their knowledge of the forest. They had raided Polani villages for years. Mieszko knew that a direct attack would be dangerous. Instead, he sent envoys offering peace if the tribe accepted his leadership. When the envoys were rejected, the prince acted swiftly. His warriors surrounded the villages, cutting off escape routes. The fighting was fierce, but disciplined tactics and Mieszko's leadership ensured victory. The conquered tribes were given choices. They could retain their lands if they pledged loyalty, or they could face exile. Many chose loyalty, recognizing the strength and fairness of Mieszko's rule. Over the following years, Mieszko's campaigns expanded the borders of the realm further east and north. He built fortresses along rivers and hills, ensuring that the newly conquered lands were protected and connected to the core settlements near the Warta River. At the same time, he continued to promote Christianity. Priests traveled with the armies, baptizing villagers who accepted the new faith. Wooden churches were built, and Christian festivals were celebrated alongside local customs to ease the transition. One evening, after a long campaign in the east, Mieszko returned to the stronghold in Poznan. He was greeted by the people with cheers, banners waving, and bells ringing from the churches Dobrawa had helped build. "Father," Bolesław said, running to him, "I saw the banners of our victories. You fought bravely." Mieszko smiled, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Courage alone is not enough, my son," he said. "A ruler must know when to fight, when to negotiate, and how to protect the people. This is the way to build a lasting kingdom." Bolesław nodded, absorbing the lesson. Even as a boy, he began understanding that leadership was not only about strength. It was about vision, justice, and faith. In the years that followed, Mieszko turned his attention to the western tribes along the Oder River. Some resisted fiercely, but the prince's strategy of combining diplomacy, faith, and military strength proved effective. Many villages pledged loyalty after witnessing the unity and stability Mieszko had created. As the realm expanded, Mieszko strengthened Poznan as the political and spiritual center. Wooden walls were reinforced with stone. Markets grew larger, and craftsmen built tools, furniture, and weapons that improved daily life. The settlement became a beacon for travelers, merchants, and pilgrims. Dobrawa remained a constant influence, ensuring that Christianity flourished even in newly conquered lands. She advised local leaders, helped establish schools for children, and encouraged the construction of churches. Her efforts ensured that the faith spread peacefully, alongside the administrative and military expansion of the realm. By the end of his campaigns, Mieszko had transformed a cluster of tribes into a strong, unified land. The borders were secure, trade flourished, and Christianity had taken root. The settlements along the rivers became the backbone of a nation that would one day be called Poland. Mieszko's victories earned him respect far beyond his lands. Christian rulers in Bohemia and the Holy Roman Empire now recognized him as a powerful and faithful leader. Envoys visited with gifts, and alliances strengthened his realm further. Yet even as he achieved these successes, Mieszko remained humble and devoted. He often prayed in the wooden churches of Poznan, giving thanks to Jesus Christ for guidance, strength, and wisdom. Through battles, diplomacy, and faith, the prince had accomplished what few thought possible. He had united tribes, expanded his realm, built settlements that would become cities, and introduced Christianity to his people. And through it all, he had prepared the next generation. Bolesław observed his father's courage, wisdom, and faith, learning the lessons that would one day allow him to become the first king of a united Poland. The foundations of a Christian kingdom were laid. The lands, once divided by forests, rivers, and rival tribes, were now linked under the leadership of Mieszko, the warrior prince who dreamed of a nation strong, united, and faithful. Poznan, the heart of his realm, stood as a symbol of this transformation. A city built by vision, defended by courage, and guided by faith. And in the quiet of the evening, Mieszko looked across the river, knowing that the future of Poland had only just begun. As the years passed, Mieszko I began to feel the weight of time pressing upon him. Though his body remained strong and his mind sharp, he knew that the future of the lands he had united depended on careful preparation. His greatest concern was not the battles he'd already fought, but the years to come and the leadership that would follow him. The young prince, Bolesław I, the brave, was growing quickly, learning not only to wield a sword but also to govern. Mieszko devoted much of his energy to teaching his son the arts of leadership, how to manage villages, oversee trade, negotiate with neighbors, and make decisions guided by faith. One bright morning in Poznan, Mieszko walked with Bolesław along the banks of the Warta River. The marketplace buzzed with activity. Merchants calling out, children running through the streets, and craftsmen hammering in the workshops. "Do you see this, my son?" Mieszko asked. "Every home, every road, every field belongs to our people. One day, it will be your duty to protect it and expand it further." Bolesław's eyes sparkled with determination. "I will not fail you, father," he said. Mieszko smiled, but shook his head gently. "Strength alone will not guide you. Wisdom, faith, and justice must lead your rule. The people follow a ruler not only because of his sword, but because of his heart." Even as he trained his son, Mieszko continued to strengthen the lands themselves. Poznan grew with new walls, markets, and churches. Priests traveled to remote villages, teaching Christian faith, guiding moral conduct, and resolving disputes. Education became a growing priority, with children learning both the practical skills of farming and trade, as well as the teachings of the Messiah. Dobrawa remained a quiet but powerful influence. Her guidance ensured that the Christian faith took root deeply among the people. even in regions recently brought under Mieszko's rule. She often counseled him on matters of governance, diplomacy, and faith. Together, they created a kingdom grounded in both strength and moral guidance. One evening, Mieszko called his council together. The room was illuminated by torches, and maps of the lands spread across the heavy oak table. "Our kingdom is strong," he said, "but unity must last beyond my lifetime. Borders are secure, yet threats remain. You must prepare to govern wisely when I am gone. And my son must learn that ruling is not only about victory in battle, but about justice and faith." The advisors nodded solemnly. They had served Mieszko for years and understood the gravity of his words. Meanwhile, Bolesław continued to grow in courage and knowledge. He trained with the warriors, learning strategy and discipline. He accompanied his father to meetings with foreign envoys, observing diplomacy in action. He listened to priests explain the teachings of Jesus Christ, learning how faith could guide a ruler. Mieszko also began preparing legal codes and administrative practices for his growing realm. He encouraged local leaders to act fairly and to resolve disputes according to both tradition and Christian teaching. His goal was a kingdom not ruled by fear, but by law, faith, and mutual respect. Even in his later years, Mieszko remained a warrior when necessary. He led campaigns to quell unrest, protect villages, and secure trade routes. But he always sought diplomacy first, knowing that lasting peace required more than victory on the battlefield. One winter evening, as snow covered the lands, Mieszko sat near the fire with Dobrawa. They spoke quietly of the years they had lived together, of victories, challenges, and the people who had joined them along the way. "Our work has shaped this land," Dobrawa said. "Your vision has brought tribes together, united faith and strength, and created a kingdom." Mieszko gazed into the flames. "Yes, but the future depends on Bolesław. He must grow to be a leader worthy of these lands." Dobrawa placed a hand on his. "He will. He has your courage and the lessons you have given him." Mieszko nodded. He must also understand mercy, justice, and the teachings of Christ. That is how a kingdom endures. In these years, Mieszko also continued his role as a spiritual guide. He visited villages, oversaw baptisms, and encouraged the people to embrace the Christian faith. He knew that a united faith would strengthen unity among the lands and ensure that the realm remained respected by neighboring Christian kingdoms. Through these efforts, Poznan grew as a center of administration, trade, and faith. The settlement that had once been a small cluster of wooden huts was now a fortified city with markets, churches, and strong walls. Mieszko often reflected on the journey from boyhood to ruler. He had united tribes through strength and diplomacy, embraced Christianity, expanded the realm through strategy and courage, and prepared the next generation to inherit his legacy. And through it all, he had instilled in Bolesław the values that would define the future king: courage, wisdom, justice, and faith. As winter melted into spring, Mieszko looked across the Warta River at the thriving city and the fields beyond. He knew that the foundation of Poland was secure, that its faith had taken root, and that its future rested in capable hands. Yet even as he prepared for the end of his rule, he remained vigilant. The world beyond the forests was full of possibilities and dangers, and Mieszko The warrior, the Christian, the unifier, would guide his people to face both with courage. The legacy of his life was clear: a strong, faithful, and united kingdom, ready to pass into the hands of the son who would one day become the first king of Poland. The years had passed swiftly for Mieszko I. His hair, once dark as the forest shadows, now carried streaks of grey, and lines marked his face from decades of battles, diplomacy, and leadership. Yet his spirit remained as strong as ever, guided by faith and the vision of a united land. Poznan, the city he had founded, now thrived as the heart of the realm. Wooden houses and workshops had grown into solid buildings. Markets bustled with traders from distant lands. Churches dotted the hillsides, ringing bells that called the faithful to prayer. It was a living testament to Mieszko's life work, a blend of strength, wisdom, and faith. Mieszko knew that the most important task of his final years was to prepare his son, Bolesław I the Brave, to inherit the kingdom. Bolesław had grown into a young man of remarkable courage, intelligence, and leadership. He had trained as a warrior, studied law and governance, and learned the Christian faith that now guided the realm. One crisp morning, Mieszko and Bolesław walked along the riverbank near the city. The water reflected the morning sun, and the air carried the scent of the fields and forests beyond. "Do you see what we have built?" Mieszko asked, gesturing toward the city. Bolesław nodded, his eyes bright. "I see a strong and faithful land, Father. I see people who trust us, homes that are safe, and a future that is ours to protect." Mieszko placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "This is only the beginning. A ruler must always work for the good of the people, protect the borders, and honor God. Never forget that strength alone does not make a king. Justice, mercy, and faith do." Bolesław bowed his head. "I will remember, Father. I will follow your guidance and serve our people well." In these years, Mieszko continued to strengthen the kingdom through both spiritual and political efforts. He visited villages, oversaw churches, encouraged trade, and maintained alliances with neighboring kingdoms. His diplomacy with the rulers of Bohemia, the Holy Roman Empire, and other territories ensured the security of his realm. Dobrawa, ever his companion, remained a guiding force. She supported education, faith, and community leadership, ensuring that the people understood and embraced the Christian teachings that Mieszko had adopted decades earlier. Together, they had transformed the lands of the Polani from scattered tribes into a unified Christian realm that would endure for generations. Even in his final years, Mieszko did not cease to lead. He oversaw military patrols, ensured the safety of trade routes, and advised local leaders. He held councils to discuss laws, trade agreements, and the administration of justice. His life was a constant balance of faith, leadership, and vigilance. As age advanced, Mieszko became increasingly aware that his time was limited. One evening, in the quiet of the stronghold, he spoke with Dobrawa in the candlelit chamber. "The work we began will continue," he said softly, "but it will be Bolesław who carries the crown and shapes the future of Poland." Dobrawa nodded, taking his hand. "He is ready, and you have prepared him well. Your legacy will live on through him, through the people, and through the faith you brought to this land." Mieszko's health began to decline, and he spent more time in prayer and reflection. he would often kneel in the wooden chapel of Poznan, giving thanks for the guidance he had received and seeking strength for the years that remained. When the day came that Mieszko felt his life nearing its end, he called Bolesław to his side. The young prince knelt beside his father, understanding the weight of the moment. "Lead with courage, wisdom, and faith," Mieszko said, his voice gentle but firm. "Protect the people, honor God, and continue to unite the lands. Remember that the strength of a ruler is measured not only by victories in battle, but by the lives he safeguards and the justice he upholds." Bolesław bowed his head, tears in his eyes. "I will not fail you, Father. I will serve our people and honor your teachings." Mieszko placed a hand on Bolesław's shoulder and whispered a final blessing. He peacefully passed from this world. His death marked the end of an era, but the beginning of another. Bolesław ascended as the ruler of the realm his father had built, inheriting a united Christian and strong land. Under Bolesław's leadership, the realm continued to grow. The son of Mieszko I would later be crowned as the first king of Poland, fulfilling the vision his father had nurtured for decades. The Christian faith took deep root, shaping the culture, law, and identity of the nation. Poznan remained the heart of this growing kingdom, a city born from Mieszko's vision and nurtured through decades of leadership, conquest, and faith. The wooden walls and fortresses had grown into the foundations of towns and cities that would thrive for centuries. Historians and storytellers would remember Mieszko as the first ruler who united the tribes of Poland, brought Christianity to his people, and laid the foundations for a kingdom that would endure. He was remembered as a warrior, a visionary, a faithful man, and the father of a king who would expand and strengthen the nation even further. Through battles and diplomacy, through faith and governance, Mieszko's life became the story of the birth of Poland, a story of courage, wisdom, and devotion to God. And through his son, the legacy continued, ensuring that the land would remain strong, united, and faithful for generations to come. The Warta River flowed on, witnessing the birth of a kingdom, the spread of faith, and the rise of a dynasty that would define the history of Poland. Mieszko I, the first Christian prince of Poland, the unifier of tribes, the founder of Poznan, had completed his journey. And, in the hands of Bolesław, the dreams of a united Christian Poland began to flourish as a new chapter of history. The story of Mieszko and Bolesław completes the tale of the founding of Poland, from scattered tribes to a strong Christian kingdom.